Hmm.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi Vijay, I can hear you.
Okay, ma'am. I can hear you too.
The speakers, I'm just trying to check.
Hello. Hello. Okay.
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
It's clear.
Is it possible for you to?
Ma'am?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you, ma'am.
Vijay, can you speak few
Yes, ma'am.
sentences?
Ma'am, thank you very much for having me over for this workshop, ma'am.
This is okay. Okay, what we'll do is when
Yes,
I
ma'am.
am speaking, you might have to switch off your thing. It is looping. Hello. No. We need to. Hello. Okay. Vijay, we've just broken for tea. We have finished observational studies as well as experimental study design, RCT and CTRI registrations and all that. So now it is qualitative study design and community based. Okay, so you have 1 hour. Okay. You want to speak something to check?
Yes, ma'am. So I can see the participants are walking in. Break mudinjiruchu polukku. So
Yeah.
that's a nice thing. Can you hear me clearly, ma'am?
Okay. Are you okay with the audio?
Yeah, for me, the audio is clear, very clear. Ungalku, are you able to hear what I'm saying?
I have a little bit of echo problem. Okay. We might have to adjust that.
Ma'am, I am unable to share the screen, ma'am. Could you help with that? I think you have to make me co-host or something.
I'll enable. Yeah, I'll be by the side. Okay. It's great privilege to introduce Dr. Vijay. He is MD Community Medicine and PhD in Community Medicine from CMC Vellore. Lot of. Okay. And Vijay's favorite topic is trust in doctor-patient relationship. That's his PhD topic. And qualitative study design is his area of passion. And he has written a book on this trust in doctor-patient relationship. And we thought he'll be the best person to talk about qualitative study design and use of community. So how to look for topics beyond your hospital-based patients. Okay, over to Vijay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for those kind words. And thank you for this opportunity to talk on quite an important topic. And hello to all the participants. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person. I was supposed to be there, but due to some health issues in the family, I'm not able to travel. So nevertheless, thank you for this opportunity to interact with all of you. If you don't mind, I'm going to switch off my video for a bit because my network is a bit shaky. So I'll switch off my video, just speak and use my slides. Then I'll go back on my video after a little bit. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, so, okay. So this is what I plan to do today is to talk to you about looking beyond the hospital for studies. Most of you are in the phase of developing your proposals, research proposals, and writing the research proposals. So for all clinicians, invariably, most clinical dissertation topics are situated within the hospital. And mostly community medicine dissertations are the ones which go out to the field. So I'm going to talk to you, give you a perspective about how almost anybody should be able to go out to outside the hospital setting and do a dissertation. And what are the advantages of taking the dissertation outside the hospital setting? This is what I propose to speak to you over the next half an hour to 40 minutes. And then briefly, I'll also talk to you about qualitative research. Qualitative research is a very vast topic in itself. So I'm not going to go into the details of how to design and conduct a qualitative study, but what I propose to do is take you through what are the advantages, what is qualitative research as such, how do we do that, and some basic examples. I'll throughout the presentations, I will give you a lot of examples, and with these examples, we will try to learn the concepts that I'm trying to drive home. So in today's presentation, I will talk to you about why we need to look beyond hospital-based studies and where all can we look. So beyond hospitals now, where else can we do these studies? What are all those situations where we can develop our research? And then I will throw a lot of examples of research questions which are outside the hospital setting, which can be done by a clinician, by a clinical postgraduate outside the hospital setting, as well as pre and paraclinical postgraduates, how to develop research questions outside the hospital. And one component of today's presentation will be qualitative research. So largely I'll be focusing on how to go outside the hospital. Why should we go outside the hospital for our dissertations? Now, where all can we look beyond hospitals? When we say looking beyond hospitals, what are the various things that we are speaking about? Number one, we are looking at doing studies in communities. And like most of you know, a community is a gathering of people, not necessarily a physical gathering. It can even be a virtual gathering. We all have WhatsApp groups. We have Facebook groups. We have groups like that. Those are also virtual communities. So community is like-minded people who come together towards fulfillment of a common goal or a common objective. So communities, you could do studies in communities. You could go do studies in schools and colleges, especially those pediatric postgraduates. If you have research questions which could take you to the schools and colleges, then it could be workplace based. Like for example, let us say there is an ophthalmology postgraduate who wants to study computer vision syndrome. And that could be a very typical IT company based workplace-based research. It could be one of our students did a study on a phenomenon called cyberchondria. Cyberchondria is like hypochondriasis. We all know what is hypochondriasis, right? Hypochondriasis na excessively thinking and obsessing about one's health and disease. Cyber is exacerbation of this obsessing over health and disease because you are frequently searching the web, cyber searching, and that is triggering thoughts, and you're doing this involving in hypochondriasis. So that is called cyberchondria. One of our students did a study in IT companies because they have liberal access to internet. Do they develop cyberchondria? So it could be workplace-based studies. Then it could be virtual studies, studies conducted through emailed surveys, telephonic surveys, video calls. Today we have very good video call facilities. You could use those for conducting interviews and surveys. And then there are studies which happen in public spaces, bus stops, railway stations, shopping malls, restaurants, coffee shops, especially community medicine research. There are a lot of people who do studies in restaurants. What are the foods which are given as default options? Is there a salt always kept on the table? So these are all like unhealthy dietary practices with respect to NCD, right? So we could do studies there. And there are so many other spaces outside the hospitals where we could do health-related studies. So I'm sure each of you could think of multiple such health spaces where studies can be done. Can you think of any other spaces where you can do dissertations outside what I have listed on this? Is it possible to have an interaction now, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Could somebody propose any other sites where you could take studies?
Force, hospitals, temple,
Yeah, that's an interesting option. Temples.
factories,
Very good. So occupational health could be in factories.
special schools, old age homes,
Very good. So they could be done in assisted living facilities, old age homes, special schools. Those are all really good ideas. In fact, I remember one of the earliest studies I was involved was in old age homes, where we studied osteoporosis among the elderly.
the jail also, sir.
Okay, jail also. So that's very interesting. Thank you for the interaction. And those are all options where you could conduct studies. You could go outside hospitals, and each of these spaces offers distinct advantages for us to conduct studies. That's what we're going to see next. Now, when we base our studies in hospitals, there are some inherent limitations. First, the disadvantages of hospital-based studies are: number one, hospital-based studies have poor generalizability. So when we say generalizability, the aim of any research study is to study a small set of people. Let us say I am conducting a study on 100 to 200 people. I find something in these 100 to 200 people, and I want to generalize it to the entire target population. Like, for example, if I want to do a study on pregnant women, let us say I want to study prevalence of iron deficiency anemia in pregnant women. So I do a study on a sample of 200 pregnant women. I want to take this study finding and I want to be able to say, okay, the prevalence of iron deficiency anemia in my sample of pregnant women is 50%. Now, I want to generalize this and say in all women in Pondicherry, the prevalence of iron deficiency anemia in pregnancy is 50%. I should be able to generalize it to the entire Pondicherry with a margin of uncertainty, which is the 95% confidence limit. Now, if I have to do this, then my sample in my study should be representative. They should all represent all the pregnant women of Puducherry. Only then I'll be able to generalize it to the entire Puducherry. So, but hospital-based studies seldom give us this kind of a generalizability. Why? Because each hospital has its own unique clientele. Like, for example, people living around the hospital will gravitate towards that hospital. Then based on the socioeconomic status, different types of people attend different types of hospitals. A typical person from a lower socioeconomic status will go to a government general hospital, whereas a person belonging to the upper class will probably go to a corporate hospital or a super specialty private hospital. So that will be the profile. So it will be generalizable only to the type of patients attending that hospital. So generalizability will be poor in a hospital-based study. That is the first limitation. The second limitation is there is something called the Bergson's bias. I'm sure you would have heard of Bergson's bias. Does anybody know what Bergson's bias is? Can somebody try giving a definition for what is Bergson's bias?
No answers, sir.
Okay. So it's a tough concept. So I'll try and explain it myself. So Bergson's bias meaning, like, let us say I am going to let us say I want to study association between smoking and deep venous thrombosis. Does smoking increase the risk of deep venous thrombosis? Now, what will I do? Let us say I want to do a case control study. I take people with deep venous thrombosis who are usually people who are attending the surgery wards and surgery OPD. Then I'll pick controls from some other ward or some other OP who do not have deep venous thrombosis. So I have cases who have deep venous thrombosis and controls who do not have deep venous thrombosis. Then I will go back and ask them history of whether they are smokers, how many pack years of smoking, that kind of history I will take. Now, what happens is there will be a difference. If smoking is associated with deep venous thrombosis, among the group who have deep venous thrombosis, there will be more number of smokers. And among the group who do not have DVT, there will be less number of smokers. Do you get that? Do you understand that design? That's the case control design. Now, in this study, what will happen is if I sample both cases and controls from the hospital itself, now let us say I am taking some patients without DVT in the hospital. The chance that this patient will be a smoker will actually be high because smoking itself will inherently increase attending hospitals because smoking will cause lung disease, smoking may cause cancer, smoking may cause some other problems. It may cause taste disorders, so many things. For a smoker has so many other reasons to go to a hospital also. Therefore, non-DVT people are also likely to be smokers. Do you understand what I'm saying? So DVT people have an incidence of smoking. Non-DVT people, if they are taken from the hospital, the smoking itself would have increased their probability of going to a hospital. Therefore, there also the smoking will reflect as being very high. So therefore, I will not be able to find the true association between smoking and deep venous thrombosis. Is this clear? Should I repeat it? I'll just repeat it one more time. So there is deep venous thrombosis and smoking, and I want to study whether these two are associated. Now, when I take people with deep venous thrombosis, I take, and then people without deep venous thrombosis. Both of these I have sampled from the hospital. Now, I want to, my study should ideally show me that those with DVT have a high level of smoking. Those without DVT do not have a high level of smoking. That is the finding I want to find. Now, what will happen is other reasons, smoking will send patients to hospital for other reasons also, other than DVT. It will send them to hospital for emphysema. It will send them for a hospital for other forms of COPD. My control group will also have high level of smoking. And therefore, I won't be able to find the true association between smoking and deep venous thrombosis. This is called Bergson's bias. And this is a very typical bias of hospital-based studies. So unless I move out of hospitals, I cannot take care of this bias. That is a major problem. Then the other major disadvantage of hospital-based studies is hospital-based studies can only answer hospital-specific questions. They cannot answer social questions or community-specific questions. Like, for example, does the quality of indoor air quality improve the lung functions in a patient with asthma? That question, hospital-based panna, it is only a self-report. But if you do that study in the community, then you can actually go to the house, you can actually measure the indoor air quality, you can do the suspended particulate material in the air, those kinds of things you can measure. So hospital-based studies can answer only hospital-based or hospital-specific research questions. They cannot look at broader perspective of health and illness. So these are some limitations of hospital-based studies. They are poorly generalizable. They are biased studies. They suffer from Bergson's bias, and they can only answer hospital-specific questions. Now, what are the advantages of going beyond the hospital? There are many. What we saw earlier are disadvantages of doing studies in the hospital. Now, let us look at advantages of moving outside. What are the advantages? We have better representativeness, because I can now go and sample different age groups, different parts, geographical locations, different socioeconomic status, different genders. I can do everything. I can do more representative sampling when I go to the community. I do not have that luxury when I am situated in a hospital. Then the other big advantage is I'll see a wide spectrum of illness covered. Usually, if you take a typical Indian patient demography, patients go to hospital only when they have very serious illness. Mild illness, early disease, many people, especially people belonging to lower socioeconomic status, will not go to the hospital. They will not forego a day's wage to go and sit in a hospital OPD for the entire day. They will not do that. They will prioritize work and livelihood more than their health. So only the more severe end of the spectrum you will see in the hospital. So hospital-based studies will usually cater only to the more severe end of the spectrum. They will not capture illnesses that belong to the milder end of the spectrum. This is called spectrum bias. This is another major problem. Therefore, when you go to the community, you can search and pick up everybody. You can pick up the whole spectrum of illness. Then hidden and undetected patients can also be included. This is a very important issue. Once this happened in our own scenario, we wanted to look at incidence of tuberculoid leprosy in schools. There was a lot of talk that leprosy has been eliminated and all that. No, in 2005, India declared that we are free of leprosy, but that's definitely not the case. Nariya leprosy incidents, we are seeing a lot of leprosy cases even now. And therefore, we did a school-based evaluation to look at hypopigmented anesthetic patches among school children. When you do this only sitting in the OPD, waiting for them to come with a skin patch, you will miss out all these hidden patients. Some of them will just remain in the schools undetected because it is a very small patch. But once you go to the school, you check every child inch by inch, every surface of the body, you will pick up undetected hidden cases of diseases. And that is a very big advantage of moving outside the hospital setting. And that is also just and fair. Nyayamana vishayam, justice. Taking healthcare to everybody rather than waiting for people to come to the hospitals. And in extension, you can also extend it to research. Rather than waiting for people to come to the hospital and including them in the research, you go out there and then conduct the research in the community so that even the unreached people can become part of the study. then it can address, when you go out to the communities, it can address broader social determinants. இப்போ வந்து increasingly everybody எல்லாரும் பேசக்கூடிய ஒரு விஷயம் வந்து social determinants of health. That is, we now very clearly understand that health is not made in hospitals, health is not provided in hospitals, health is made and provided out there in the communities. மக்களே தான் தன்னுடைய people are taking care of their own health and they are making their own health. We are only people who facilitate that process, and therefore broader social determinants, if you have to study, you have to go out there to the communities. The next important thing is empowerment of communities. When imagine sitting inside the ivory tower of a hospital, patients coming to you and you are conducting a study. அது ஒரு power dynamic. அவங்க பயந்து they will be afraid to come into the hospital because the hospital itself is a very alien and strange space. They'll come inside, they will find it very, very apprehensive, and they will participate. On the other hand, imagine you are going to the community. நீங்க அவங்க ஏரியாவுக்கு போறீங்க. You are going to their space and it is their space. They are comfortable. In their comfort zone, you are going and conducting a study. Anga, the patients will be able to articulate their demands. They will be better able to tell you, this is what I need. And they'll be able to better protect themselves from exploitation and vulnerability. So that is empowerment of the communities. When we go out there to the communities to conduct research, it definitely empowers the communities. So putting all of this together, when we conduct studies outside the hospital, when we go out there into the communities, it increases social value. Social value அப்படின்னா என்ன அர்த்தம்னா what this study can contribute to the betterment of the society. And that happens when you move outside the hospital setting to conduct research. In fact, இப்பலாம் BMJ, British Medical Journal இருக்கு இல்லையா? So you would have heard of BMJ, no? So BMJ la, if you have to publish something, recently we had submitted a paper for publication in the BMJ. And adula vandu one of the essential questions that they ask is, were community members, patients involved in the study design, study data collection, data analysis, and reporting? In the ella process lime, now there is an increasing scholarship which says at every stage of the research, the community and patients must be involved. Community engagement அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க, and that's a very increasing buzzword today in medical ethics circles and research ethics circles. And this community engagement can happen only when we break out of the hospitals for conducting our studies. So these are some advantages of looking beyond hospitals for our studies. Now I'm going to throw open the floor for some discussions. இப்போ என்ன பண்ண போறேன்னா, I'm going to ask research questions and I'm going to ask you to reflect what would be the ideal place to conduct this research study. Again, having said that, I'm going to tell you a disclaimer. Some studies are best done within the hospitals only. Sila studies எல்லாம் hospital தான் பண்ண முடியும். Like for example, you are operating on somebody. That and all, you cannot go and do it in a community. You have to do that in the hospital only. Some studies have to be done in the hospital. Some studies have to be done in the communities. So if I'm going to throw open some examples to you, and I want you to reflect on what would be the ideal setting for conducting this study and why. So first scenario, the research question is projected on your screen. What is the burden of lower limb chronic venous insufficiency among adults in India? Is the research question. Where would you conduct the study? Either on it's a prevalence study. You can see it's a prevalence study, right? So the best design, like you know, would be a cross-sectional design. Where would you conduct this study and how would you do this study? Anybody?
Hospital based. Why? Because we get more samples in the hospital. That is the answer, sir.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for that answer. So the answer is that it should be a hospital-based studies because lower limb chronic venous insufficiency patients, they will come to the hospital. That's your reasoning, right? Now let us analyze this. I want to know the burden of lower limb chronic venous insufficiency. Burden na enna artham? We have to split the word burden and try to understand it. That means in the population, how many people have chronic venous insufficiency? Abdina enna artham? Whole population I have to see. And the population, everybody will not have chronic venous insufficiency. Some only small number will have. Ella disease, my teacher, Dr. J.P. Mulil used to say, all diseases are rare only. There is nothing called extremely common disease. At any given point of time, that disease is rare only. Like common cold, I mean, everybody does not have a common cold. If you take a classroom full of 250 students, maybe 10 or 15 at any point may have a common cold. Will 150 people have common cold in a class of 250 students? Unlikely. So every disease is rare. So that's the assumption. So ipo or population la evlo perukku chronic venous, how many people have lower limb chronic venous insufficiency paakano appadina, I have to study both normal people as well as people with chronic venous insufficiency. Only then I will know out of so many people, which includes a mixture of both patients with chronic venous insufficiency and without, so many only have chronic venous insufficiency. Only then I'll be able to know. So I need the denominator to be all people, not just people who have the disease. People who have the disease are in the numerator. In the denominator, I have all people. So in the all people, representative, if I have to capture, I can capture it only in the community. If let us say I am doing it in surgery OPD. Now what will happen? Many people who attend the surgery OPD may be for varicose veins. They may be for deep venous thrombosis. They may be coming there for conditions related to venous insufficiency. So it will be an overestimate. When I sample it from the surgery OPD, it will be an overestimate. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Therefore, whenever you are doing a burden of disease study, it has to be done in the community. Only then you will get a representative number. So this is a typical example of a study which must be done only in the community setting. If you do it in the surgery OPD setting, you will get a lot of cases, but it will be an overestimate of the burden. Deceased people da and the OPK varuvanga. So it will be an overestimate. Now let us move on to the second scenario. The second scenario is, what proportion of adults in India have vaccine hesitancy against the COVID-19 vaccine? Where will you do this?
Community based.
Can you explain why?
Why? Because the persons are hesitant at taking vaccines in the community only, sir.
Very good. So hesitant people usually hide in the community. They will not come to the hospital. In a hospital, so they will not come to the hospital. They will be hiding. So that is one very important reason. The other important reason is people who have comorbidities have a higher risk perception. Let us say I have diabetes and hypertension. COVID-19 vandurumongra bayam I'll already have. I'll be afraid that I may be affected by COVID-19, and if I get COVID-19, I will have a more serious illness. So I'll be afraid. Therefore, self-perception of risk will be very high. Therefore, I will not hesitate to go and get the vaccine. So hospital attending populations will have higher comorbidities and therefore higher self-perception of risk and therefore lower hesitancy. That's a very typical phenomenon that happens in hospital-based settings. So for these purposes, you have to do it in the community. Now I have another option. Idiye community la pannamaki. You remember, no? In our states and all, they were doing vaccination campaigns, bus stops, railway stations, malls. They had booths in which they were giving the vaccination. Do you remember that? Now, what if I do the survey there? Can I do the survey there?
Answer is yes, sir. Why means because the population will be there also.
Interesting. So the answer is yes. The problem is these are all booths specifically kept for vaccination. So imagine if you are somebody who is hesitating to get COVID vaccine, will you go anywhere near these booths? You will probably hide away from these booths, no? I know so many people அங்க அந்த village health nurse வந்து கிராமத்துக்கு போவாங்க கிராம சுகாதார செவிலியர் she will go to the village, the ANM will go to the village with her vaccine carrier, and even when they hear her bike coming they will run away, they will go and hide inside their homes, they will shut their doors. This was happening in 2022 21 22 when the vaccination drive was in its peak. This was happening all around us. So appo in the booths and in the mall and restaurant and bus stand and railway station where they had COVID vaccination booths, people who have hesitancy will not be there. You cannot find them in those camps. Therefore, you will underestimate the burden of COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy. The ideal space to do this is households. வீடு வீடா போய் கதவை தட்டி நீங்க வேக்சின் போடுவீங்களா, ஏன் போட மாட்டீங்க, are you afraid, are you hesitant, அந்த மாதிரி question கேட்கணும். That is also a very, very challenging thing to do, but that's the only way to do it. If you do it in vaccination booths, you will underestimate. If you do it in hospitals, you will underestimate. The only place to do this is out there in the community, like how you originally mentioned. Very good. So shall we move on to the next scenario? The next scenario is this. What is the incidence of device associated infections in Puducherry? Device associated infections. Catheter associated urinary tract infection, central line associated bloodstream infection, ventilator associated events, ventilator associated pneumonia. இதெல்லாம் தானே device associated infections. இதை எங்க பண்ண முடியும்?
Hospital based study, sir.
Exactly. So this is a study which you cannot do in the community. It has to be done only in the hospital for multiple reasons. One, people with devices inserted, finding them in the community is less probable. There are still people who are on long-term indwelling urinary catheters communities la irupanga. It is possible. And some very rich houses, they may have the entire ICU set up in their own house and be on a ventilator. Those probability is there, but it is a very low probability. The more likelihood of finding people with devices is in the hospital setting. Not only that, device associated infections we are more worried about hospital acquired infections. We are more worried about nosocomial infections or hospital acquired infections, and therefore this study should only be done in a hospital based settings. Are you getting a picture of how to do the analysis of which studies to situate in the health facility and which studies to break out from the health facility and go out into the community? Now let's take another example. Do children with bronchial asthma have a higher prevalence of stunting compared to children without bronchial asthma?
Community based study.
Okay, can you explain why?
Explain. You can find bronchial asthma patients. You can find bronchial asthma patients more in the hospital than the community.
அப்போ அது ஹாஸ்பிட்டல் பேஸ்ட் ஸ்டடியா தானே இருக்கணும்.
Now she is saying hospital more in the community than in the hospital, sir.
Okay, so there is a little bit confusion there. So let us go along with your argument. Your argument is people with children with bronchial asthma have a higher hospital attendance rate, which is very true. Children with bronchial asthma, any in the bad weather conditions, almost every day they will be in the hospital for a nebulization. Every alternate day or once in every week, they will be in the hospital for nebulization. So easy space to catch children with bronchial asthma is the pediatric outpatient department of a hospital. So anga vande, let us say we will measure their height to look at stunting among children in the with bronchial asthma. Now I have to compare them with children without bronchial asthma. Anga the challenge is arising. When I pick children without bronchial asthma also from the hospital, what will happen? And the children who are attending hospitals. Children who are attending hospitals probably have a higher possibility of developing malnutrition. Where they are attending hospitals, right? They may be recurrent infections, they may be attending, or they may be attending for some other chronic illness. So when I sample comparison children also from the hospital, the chance that I will find more stunting is also more because they also have some other condition which makes them stunted. Therefore, ideally, this should be done cases sampled from the hospital and controls sampled from the community. Avanguluடைய age and sex matched healthy children from the community I should be able to compare. அப்ப எனக்கு என்ன கிடைக்கும்னா I'll have children with bronchial asthma from the hospital and normal children from the community. Either they are classmates in the school or their neighborhood children, age and sex matched. When I pick them, then I will get a better picture. I will get the picture of comparison between children with and without bronchial asthma, and I'll be able to get a more accurate picture of what is the prevalence of stunting. Do you get the picture? So that is another scenario of where I have to sample from both the hospital as well as the community. So there are some more examples, but I will leave this PowerPoint with you, and maybe you can discuss these examples later within your small group. Now, how do I decide whether to conduct the study in the hospital or outside the hospital? There are some questions which I need to ask myself, and these questions will help me understand whether I do the study within the hospital or outside. The first one is, who is the target population? Yeah, you must have understood already that target population means the findings of this study, on whom will it apply? In the findings, on whom should I apply the findings of this study? That is the target population. So when I say children with bronchial asthma, are they more stunted? The target population is children with bronchial asthma who come from Puducherry. That's target population. I can define it like that. So that is the first question. So if my target population is general population in the community, then I need representativeness. If my target population is, I want to generalize the findings of this study only to those who attend my OPD, then the target population is children who attend your OPD. Anga vande you should make a distinction. Who is the target population? The second question is, where will a representative sample be obtained? Will I be able to obtain the representative sample from the OPD or from the wards or from the community or from schools? Engende ஒரு நல்ல representative sample I will be able to obtain? That is the second question. Third one is, will hospital-based samples bias my finding? This is something that you need to reflect on very closely. Like how we reflected for the asthma study, like how we reflected for the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy study. Adila vande hospital-based panna, definitely it will be biased. We saw that, right? We did an analysis and we discussed that. Adamadri, you have to do an analysis and discuss, will hospital-based study bias your findings? And then the next important thing is, you need resources to be able to go outside the hospital to conduct the study. Enna resources veno? You need human resource. You need somebody to show you, provide you entry into the community. Permission vaangano, அந்த வீடுகள் எங்க இருக்குன்னு போய் தேடணும். Some social worker or somebody who will guide you and give you entry or access into the community. And the human resource வேணும். Then you may have to travel multiple times. அதுக்கான monies வேணும். For traveling, money will be required. Then time வேணும். The most important resource, especially for a postgraduate doing a busy clinical post-graduation, dedicated time to go out there to the community. Your dissertation time, when you will be given protected time to reach out and do the study. So in the resources, are they available for me to reach out? That is another question you need to ask. Resources scarce are, I don't have time to go now. Obviously, that's not an option for you. Then the last question is, it is time consuming. When you have to go outside the hospital setting to do a study, it is time consuming. You have to ration more time for your data collection. Is that feasible? So these are some questions you ask yourself before you decide whether I go break out of communities to do this study. So this is one example of a PG dissertation from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. This is a obstetrics and gynecology PG. Look at the study she has done. She has done perceptions and practices of rural Indian women in contraception, abortion, and sexual health, a cross-section study. She has gone out to the community and she has spoken to rural women. And the rural area, Ballabgarh is AIMS's community area, right? Outreach area. Anga poite Haryana la irukadu. Anga poite she has spoken to all these people and she has tried to understand what is the prevalence of all these contraception practices, abortion practices, and sexual health. This is a very, very rare example of how an OGPG goes out, does a postgraduate dissertation out in the community, and then this is a very well-cited paper. It has been cited multiple times, and it's a in a good journal. It's already also been published. So this is an example of how one could reach out, break out from the confines of a hospital and conduct meaningful studies. Now, I will take the next 10 minutes. I think I have 15 minutes more. Ma'am, do I have 15 minutes more? No. Okay, so I'll take the next 5 to 10 minutes to provide a very, very brief overview of qualitative research. Qualitative research, what is it? It is nothing but the process of understanding psychological and social aspects of a person's life, attitude, belief, behavior, perception, opinion, experiences. A person's psychological and social aspects which determine or influence their health. I'm trying to understand that. Like, for example, Mahalakshmi Madam was talking to you about my PhD dissertation work, which was trust in doctor-patient relationships. Now, if I want to study how a patient trusts their doctor, how does the trust build? If I want to study, will I be able to measure it? Do I have a say trustometer or some trustomanometer? I don't have anything like that which I can apply and which I can measure the level of trust. I just go sit with people, talk to them, understand nambike eppadi varum. And I just try to talk to them, gain some understanding into how they develop trust, and therefore I go deep into their social life. I go deep into their thought process, their thinking, their attitudes, and I try to develop one understanding. So it is very different from measurements that we are used to doing in quantitative research. Quantitative research na prevalence of diabetes in a population. Na poi ellarkum glucose tolerance test panniyache. Pannite all those who have high levels of fasting plasma glucose or high levels of 2-hour post glucose load plasma glucose, I classify them as diabetes. People with diabetes, and I measure how many people have diabetes. I cannot just say how many of you trust, raise your hands, count all of those people and say so many people trust. Because trust in I don't even know what they mean by trust. I need to first understand what people mean by trust. Then I need to understand what are the dimensions. What does trust really mean? I'll give you an example. In one of my interviews, patients told me, if I go to a OP and if I see a lot of people are waiting outside the OP, then I will trust that doctor. Because that doctor has to be a good doctor. Kairasikara doctor. That's why there is a lot of crowd. So crowd waiting outside the OP as an indicator of trust. I cannot use any meter to measure this. Only if I sit and talk to people, that perception will come out. Another patient told me, this doctor is like a family friend. எங்க வீட்ல எல்லா விசேஷத்துக்கும் இந்த டாக்டரை நாங்க கூப்பிடுவோம். In all our festivals and good occasions in our family, we invite this doctor. We give a invitation to this doctor. And that is a measure of trust. அது வந்து அவங்களுக்கு எந்த அளவுக்கு that doctor மேல they have trust அப்படிங்கிறது அது காட்டுறது. So that is another way of understanding trust. All these things can be understood only if you sit and discuss with people, talk to them and try to gain an understanding. அந்த மாதிரி புரிஞ்சுக்கக்கூடிய psychological and social aspects of a person's life, when you try to understand, that is called qualitative research. And there is no focus on measuring or counting and all those things. All those things are obsolete in qualitative research. We don't do any of those things. We just understand. It is called meaning-centric research. We try and understand people's experiences, beliefs, behaviors, attitudes, and perceptions and opinions. That is qualitative research. So there are characteristics of a qualitative research. Enna appadina, a qualitative research believes that truth is very subjective. What is true for me need not be true for you. Like I may like, let us say, Varis movie ipo release aayirukku illaya. So some people like it, some people don't like Varis. And so that is not like a measurement of Varis. Varis success ah illaya measure pandradhukku we have box office collection is one metric. But then how many people like it? How many people do not like it? How many people find it one cliche drama? How many people find it as an interesting watch? That is subjective. It is so subjective and it depends on different people. And that subjective reality, capture pandrathu, is process of qualitative research. There is no single objective truth out there. It is a subjective reality and we co-create the reality. The participant in the research and the researcher together sit and create the reality. And that is called qualitative research. That is the typical characteristic of qualitative research. I'll throw some examples of qualitative research, and with that, I will quickly summarize what we mean. So qualitative research na enna, I use interviews, I sit with people, I talk to them, I try to understand their experiences, opinions, attitudes, perceptions, idella understand panikkiradhu to gain a peep into their psychological and social life. That is qualitative research. Now I'll give some examples and let us try and see what we can learn from these examples. Let us just look at the first question. How did women access pregnancy and delivery services during the COVID-19 lockdown? COVID-19 there was a universal lockdown. So பெண்களால வெளியில போய் pregnancy and delivery services access பண்ண முடியல. So how did they negotiate this? What did they do? This is typically a qualitative research question. So the focus of this question is how. So I'll sit with a woman. I'll sit with hundreds of women who were pregnant in that 2020, pregnant irundha women odalla I will sit and have a conversation and I will find out where did you undergo pregnancy checkups? How did you go? Who took you there? What mode of transport did you use? Then what difficulties did you face? During lockdown, did you have to get special permissions to go to the hospital? Then how many vehicles did you have to change? In the Mari, I'll keep asking questions. It is not a survey questionnaire, but I'll just sit with them, have a conversation and try and understand the whole thing. Some very, very emotional stories may come out of it. Some difficulties which they had to overcome may come out of it. All of those things are important knowledge. And how did they cope with it? How did they overcome the challenge? Especially if you talk to women who were pregnant during COVID-19 lockdown, they would have really gone through a lot of anxiety. In a checkup, correct am I doing the right thing? They may have gone through guilt. Am I neglecting my baby? They may have gone through worry, anxiety. All of these things you can capture and you can create a story regarding what does a woman go through when she is pregnant during the lockdown period of COVID-19. And that's a complete comprehensive understanding. Edukku indha understanding mukkiyam appadina, this helps us plan specific interventions. Next time when there is a situation where public transport is limited, we need to specifically focus on pregnant women and we need to make facilities available for them to obtain antenatal care. அப்படிங்கறத புரிஞ்சுக்கிறதுக்கு this kind of a study will be useful. This is one example. Now let us take this other example. What do patients who undergo below knee amputation for diabetic foot disease feel and experience? This is a very traumatic experience. When somebody loses a foot because of diabetic foot ulcer, I'm sure many of you have seen patients like this. Many of you have treated dressed wounds of the feet. Many of you would have encountered the difficulties. But there is meaning behind documenting what exactly they feel. Are they feeling like a part of their body is gone? So how do they feel about it? Then living with a rotten foot, and the foot it is rotten, and there are maggots in the foot. And how does that make them feel? A part of their body is completely gone and it is dead. How does that make them feel? These will give rise to some very, very emotional narratives. And those narratives help us gain a good understanding of what does somebody who has a diabetic foot ulcer actually feel. What are the things they feel? How do they experience it? And this will help us provide emotional support. And this will help us provide counseling. This will help us provide supportive care. Idallam provide pandradhukku it will be very, very useful. So that is another lived experience research. This is called a lived experience research. How do you experience the phenomenon? How do young couples experiencing infertility cope with it? Process of coping. Infertility is a growing problem now. And especially young couples who are not able to conceive, they go through a lot of anxiety. They go through a lot of trauma. How do they cope with it? What do they do? What is adoption an option? How long do they have to wait? What is a socially acceptable norm? What is culturally acceptable? So many things can come out of it. In fact, one of my friends, she did a research on infertility. There is a very famous book by the author Perumal Murugan. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about him. He wrote a book called Madoru Bagan. One part woman solli, it got translated in English. Madoru Bagan oru pusthagam, Perumal Muruganoda pusthagam. He wrote about infertility. He documented the story of infertility that a young couple undergo. And this is the story is situated in Tiruchengodu. Tiruchengodula Ardhanarishwarar Kovil onnu irukku. So the whole story is situated there. And one of my friends did a PhD on infertility. And she took this book. And in the book, analyze pannanga. In the story, analyze panni, she understood the dimensions of experience of infertility through fiction. That is another qualitative research method. Fiction does not come from thin air. No, it comes from the society. It comes from the world around us. So qualitative research method is so diverse that you could just pick up a novel, you could analyze it, you could identify themes that emerge from the novel, and you could make a analysis of infertility experience. So that is another research question. So these research questions, you will understand, you can never answer these questions using quantitative measurement techniques. Counting, measurement la panni idu purinjikradhukku vaaippe kedaiyadhu. So some more examples are there. You can go through them in leisure at a later time. Qualitative research gives us in-depth understanding. It helps us to get a very deep understanding of the phenomenon. It helps us understand how and why questions. How do people cope? Why do people go through emotional trauma when they are infertile? In the questions, they help us to answer. And then they take us very close to reality. The people who are experiencing it are telling you the phenomenon. It's coming right from the horse's mouth. So it takes us close to reality. And people participate in generation of knowledge. The knowledge is true, pure knowledge. It comes from participation of people. Therefore, qualitative research is very, very advantageous, and it is very useful for these reasons. So quickly summarizing, these are the take-home messages from today's session. Wherever feasible, wherever meaningful, we should look beyond hospitals for research. So the operative words here are feasibility and meaning. If it feasible outside the hospital, you should attempt to do community-based studies. Qualitative research is meaning-centered. Trying to understand meaning behind what people go through. it gives us a sneak peek into the personal lives, social lives, and their lived experiences. And ultimately, good research is one which produces social value. I told you about this idea of social value. So if my PG dissertation gives social value, or it makes the society better in even one small way, that is good research. And therefore, our attempt should not be to create some earth-shattering finding or some Nobel Prize winning finding. Adu illa goal. The goal is to do meaningful research, and through doing this meaningful research, create a little bit of social value and create some improvement in the society. So that is the take-home message. And thank you very much for the patient listening. Once again, sincere apologies for not being present there personally.
Thank you so much, sir. It was an interesting talk, sir. Once again, sir, ma'am has a question.
Was one of the speakers in our FFF webinar series. We were conducting the regular webinars. So he came up in one of the series, we talked about how we can influence healthcare outcomes. And he came up with one qualitative research project of his, where he had talked to pregnant women who had delivered in the hospital and the baby died. These women were put in the same ward as the women with newborn babies. And when they did a qualitative study, these women gave the feedback. I'm seeing all other mothers with newborn babies, and I don't have a child. And it is very, very depressing for me. So subsequent to that, I think Tamil Nadu government came up with a solution that women who lost a baby during delivery will be put in a separate ward or housed separately compared to other women. So that is what he means by meaningful research. It's not just producing some garbage. It is not producing some book which has to be signed by 10 different people and submitted to university. All that has to be done. But if you are going to spend so much of time and effort, might as well do something worthwhile. Thanks, Vijay. I remembered that story very well.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, that was a very emotional research that we did. Almost every day when we come back from that research, all three of us will be crying and ஏதோ ஒரு emotional impact பண்ணிடும். The very moment that your research study impacts you so deeply, it will definitely impact the society deeply. So you should make sure that you pick a topic which is close to your heart, work on it sincerely, go out there and aim at making some small change. And if it impacts you, it will impact the society. It will impact people that you're reaching out to. Sometimes just the process of conducting the interview is so therapeutic to the person to whom you're talking. They get a space where they can speak and be heard. So adallam on the small subtle values of conducting research which we often don't think of, but those things are very, very useful, meaningful.
Sir, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for having me over.
Thank you, sir. So we can log out, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.